Hi.
Hi everybody, my name's Prem, this is Carly, and we are joining you today, keen to share with you about some of our lessons and learnings in relationship and navigating through challenging conversations, sharing our reality when we have differences, conflict, things that cause us to be indifferent and possibly challenged by that. When we get triggered, when to have the conversation, how to have the conversation. And we're at our home on a river with lots of school kids who've hired kayaks that are now coming up the river screaming. So I'm not sure I can have a challenging conversation with them because they're too far away, but I would if I could, believe me. So let's get started. A key thing that we want to talk about today, and we're going to be doing a series of Facebook Lives. We like to do that. Once we get on a rant about something, we'll do a bunch of them. So we're going to be doing that on conflict and challenging conversations and how to navigate through them and be close on the other side, or closer or more understood.
Yeah, like how can you actually transmute conflict and difficulty into something which is actually better than it was kind of before you had that difficulty? And that to me is like the gold in relational skills, right? Where we can do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I used to think when people would say that's just like a really nice idea, but you know, I didn't have evidence of it. But I do today. I do have evidence of that. I definitely have evidence of when there's challenge, feeling closer afterwards. So that's what we want to help people have the skills and develop the capacities to know how to do that. Alrighty, so today what we're going to talk about is, wow, those kids are really amping up. Today what we're going to talk about is the difference between when we are, like what do we do when we're really triggered and we're in a conversation and we're just looping in circles, yeah? What do we do about that? And there's a key distinction that we want to talk about today. Oh, amazing. Here we go.
It's a kayak convoy.
It's a kayak. It looks like a race. Oh no, they're all tied together. Four kayaks. Okay, so what do we do when we might be having a repetitive experience of not feeling heard, not feeling understood, not feeling met, these sorts of things? I can certainly say that that's been an experience that I think both of us have
For sure.
experienced, even if we just talk about our relationship here. It's probably the safest one to talk about, given that no one else is here. Where we could have been in these types of challenging conversations and finished both feeling unheard, both feeling unseen, both feeling not known.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the most challenging spots in conversation, right? Where I feel hurt and I don't really feel like I've been kind of properly acknowledged in my hurt. You know, I think that's common for us generally, you know. And when we're in that spot, it can be really hard to kind of move on and move forward. Like how do we figure out, well, what do we do differently next time, you know? Because I can't kind of let go so much because I'm like, hang on, you did that thing and I got really hurt by it. And if you haven't acknowledged that, you know, I'm going to just kind of stay stuck in those feelings a little bit. But at the same time, at some point you've got to move on, right? So, you know...
When?
Well, it's like, when have we been seen enough, you know? It's kind of a thing like, has there been enough kind of acknowledgement, and what role do we play as the person who's been hurt as part of that as well? And all of that can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah. That's a good point is that I'd like to actually slow down in is, at what point is it enough how much we've been seen? And you see, that's a tricky question because it's really subjective. It's really, really subjective, and it's not that simple, because I think many things play into the experience of being seen. And yes, the other person is in part responsible for how they respond as to whether you are expressing that you hear me. And I think a good deal also is on the other side, which is, can I let it in, the things that you are saying or how you're showing up, as enough? And at what point, you know, and what is enough for me? And the degree to which I'm feeling this pain, am I actually hoping that you will relieve me of the pain by what you say? And that's tricky territory. That's really tricky territory, because how the other person would know what they would need to do to relieve my pain, whether it's actually in alignment with where they're at and what they're able to offer. This is really, really tricky territory that I see heaps of couples coming to me in. That's a pain point, particularly for the women. And, you know, some of the things I think I might say today may be a bit controversial in that sense, because I think that we can soothe ourselves and know what's true for us and give ourselves a lot more of the care and the acknowledgement of how we're feeling than many people do, and that they actually looking for the other to do that.
Yes, and validation of our own reality, because I think that's where it can particularly get tricky, you know, is when we've got a difference of interpretation around kind of what actually happened. You know, and then if I want you to kind of say you're right, but actually you saw it differently, and ultimately you're not going to say that to me. You might say, well, I understand you see it differently, like that's kind of a good thing to do. But if there is that kind of difference, well, sometimes it's like we're never going to be able to move on if that's what we're waiting for.
Well,
right?
that's highly problematic.
Yeah.
That is a highly problematic context. And I think that this is one of the key places that as humans we get very stuck, which is I need for you to see how it was true what happened for me, and how it was true, how it was. And that in and of itself, the need for that is actually a request for another person to possibly violate their own reality. Because they could see it differently, and quite often we do, and of course we're going to, unless they're facts, we're going to see them differently. And I say to couples, you can either be right or married, and actually the facts are not that important. What's most important is that we go, okay, these are the facts, that's what happened, how do you feel, how do I feel, acknowledge that that the other person felt that way. Actually, the meaning that they assign to it, about who you are and what your intention is and that kind of thing, tricky territory. But we're going to get into that into some more Facebook Lives. Today we're going to focus on what is the context that we're in right now and in a conflict, and what are our expectations for it.
Just want to point out that Athena asked this question of what if the other person's being outright disrespectful. Well, for sure, I think that stuff needs to be called out. If the person has a tone that I'm like seems really kind of intense, you know, has a lot of intensity, or they're interrupting, you know, or they're starting to name call, that's like all that type of stuff makes it hard to actually even stay in the conversation, you know.
I wouldn't be in the conversation if that's like someone being disrespectful. Well, okay, that's also subjective, by the way. But if somebody is, if you're getting triggered, this is more to the point for me, anyway. Let's face it, I like to be right. If you, so therefore I am. So if you feel triggered by how the other person is responding to you, you need to get out of the conversation. It's not actually about controlling them and how they need to be. No, you're unable to stay in the conversation. That's it. And that's okay. Actually, we'll do another Facebook Live on that. Knowing when you're not able to be in a conversation is really important. If I'm triggered and I'm not really able to hear you and I'm making meaning that you're being disrespectful, I should get out of that conversation and then have it at a different time. Hey, this is not a good time for me. Could we do it at another time? And then you have another go and see how you feel. But I would caution you from waiting for another person to be a particular way so that you can be okay. No, just check, am I okay in this conversation? Like, sometimes you can be disrespectful. See, I don't like that word because that's an assumption that he is actually doing something that in his world may not be true, right? So let's say, quick tip. Okay, so when I make up that you're being disrespectful, I feel hurt. So how about we say, when I feel hurt, I check, can I be in this conversation or not, right? So I can have conversations with Carly when I feel hurt. But it's up to me to measure how hurt I am or how hurt I'm feeling as to whether I can stay in that conversation or not. So he can actually behave in ways that are suboptimal in a conversation, and he doesn't have to behave in a particular way, because if I'm really resourced, I can actually handle it. You know, and it might be hurting me a bit, but I can stay in. But that's me on a good day, and some days I can't. And then this becomes less about who Carly is, that I need to control him or judge him how he's being, and I just get to, because I actually get to take my power back, because really it becomes about me and whether I can be in the conversation or not, in the way that would have me leave the conversation feeling like I'm in integrity. Whether he feels in integrity about the way he behaves is between him and himself and his spirit. It's got nothing to do with me, actually. It's all about, can I take in how he's being and stay connectable? And if I can't, I got to get out. Anyway, that was a sideline.
Just briefly on that one, something that does come up in this territory between us is where one of us kind of seems quite intense to the other person. So a request that we will make to each other is like, hey, can you just slow down a little bit, you know, and speak a bit more gently and slowly, because I'm finding how you're speaking pretty intense, you know, and this is territory that I feel vulnerable in, you know.
Yeah.
And kind of sharing that part of our reality, I think, is really helpful to the other person. And sometimes it's not being like that intensity is not disrespect. It's like I have a lot of passion, you know, and I'm sharing with a lot of energy.
And the intensity is actually the intensity I'm feeling when he's speaking that way. He can't actually be intense. He can just be him.
I can be pretty intense.
Yeah. Well, but it's intense because you feel the intensity, right?
Yeah.
But I cannot say that you are intense. What is happening is your way of being, the way that it lands inside of my nervous system, feels intense for me. There's actually no such thing as you are intense. That's not accurate. It's like slippery boundary meaning making there. It's actually, I experience how you are in my body as intense. I feel the intensity, right? Because of perhaps what day it is today, or because of how I'm already feeling. But you could be, how do I know that? Let's just get clear here. How do we know whether something is subjective or not? The quickest way to know the answer to that is put 5 different people in front of Carly and ask them how they experience him. They'll all say intense. No. You know, put 5 different people. Like, if you were to imagine, if this was with somebody else, could they be having a different experience? And if they could be, the experience is subjective. I'm going to call that a fact, because essentially, if I find you intense, that's actually about me. Because the next person could find it engaging. The next person could find it frightening. The next person could find it interesting. The next person could find it loving, right? So the next person could say, wow, I can see he's really in struggle, but he's really keen, whatever. These are all subjective assumptions that I'm making about what's happening, but it's actually about me. So the request of, hey, would you be willing to slow down here, is because I'm needing that, not because there's something wrong with you over there and you're too much. It's like, hey, I really want to stay in this conversation with you and I really want to hear you, but I'm actually struggling to hear anymore because I'm noticing a lot of intensity inside. Would you be willing to slow down a bit? This is like the other person's dignity stays fully intact. They're not wrong, they're not bad, and I'm being fully responsible for what I need. And that's great. That's what we want. We want to actually let people know what it is that we need inside of conversations. Where it gets dangerous is if when we make it about the other person, that they are this way, and if they weren't this way, I'd be okay, and therefore you need to be different. Nah.
And you need to acknowledge how you are being, so that I feel like I am, validated, so that we can move on. That's where we're going to
Which is
spin.
good. That's back to where we were, and I'm glad you brought us back.
Yes.
Because that's really important. We think we need that a lot more than what we really truly do. I'm sorry if that lands badly in your body. If you're one of those people who just deeply, deeply wants to be understood and deeply wants the other person to just get it. Part of being a grown-up is that people aren't going to get it. They're not going to get it how you got it because they're not inside of your body. They don't have your history. They're not you. So knowing at what point is enough for me for them to get it, right? So we'll do another Facebook Live on that because I think it's a really deep, rich area, but it's not where we're going today. So I'm going to say now that there's how we see it is there's two modes that we could be in. It's a really simple distinction. So let's call it, we're either in expressing mode or we're in solution mode. And when we know which mode we're going to be in, that's really helpful, because if you're in solution mode and I'm in expressing mode, that's going to be problematic, or vice versa. So that's the first thing, is like having clarity of what mode we're in. Secondly, my humble opinion is that we think we need a lot more time in one than the other, which is expressing mode. We think that our expressing mode, we misjudge that what the actual expressing mode is for. So we'll talk about that, and how long do we stay in it for, and how do we actually, inside of the expressing mode, get the crux of what it is that we're wanting to say across to the other person. Because essentially my guess is that for most people, what they're really wanting is an outcome. In conflict, what they want is a particular outcome. They want something to change. They want something to be different. And so the second mode is really key. The second mode, which is how do we, listening mode. Yeah, so like listening mode is not, listening mode you would say is throughout. So it's in either mode, whether I'm speaking or I'm not speaking, I need to be listening. I need to be listening to what's happening between us. I need to be listening here. I need to be listening to his nonverbals whilst I'm expressing. So this is not expressing or listening mode, as in speaking or listening. Let's talk about what expressing mode is so that makes more sense. So expressing mode, let's actually give them an example of how it used to happen with you and me.
Yeah, well, so by expressing mode, we mean when that type of conversation where I need to be heard. It's really a conversation to let emotions be expressed. And this is a really important, I think, part of relating, though what we're saying is that we can easily get lost there a little bit and stay longer than we really need to. So
a lot longer.
Expressing is when I got hurt and I need you to understand how you impacted me, to feel like I'm being respected in this relationship. If I know that you know how you impacted me, then I can relax into that. I can feel safer in the relationship because going forwards, I know that you're going to have a bit more sensitivity to that type of impact, right? And so that's me, about me sharing my feelings, my emotions, how I got hurt, and maybe how I got angry in response to that, and how maybe whatever it is, my childhood stuff came up, or my inner critic started to get loud. You know, there was like a whole inner experience that happened for me in response to that, how I was impacted, and I need to kind of express that experience.
Some of it.
Some of it. Yeah.
Like, I just want to be really clear here. The whole inner experience that we have is part of being human.
Yeah.
But nobody owes you anything that they should want to be available for going into the innards of your inner experience. It's like, that's too much. That is too much to want from somebody. It's too much to need them to be able to give this to you. That's actually your job. Your job is to really know the innards of your deep inner experience. All the parts of you that arose, how they felt, the meaning they assigned to it, how that impacted other parts of you, all of it. That's you with you, and go there, baby. Like, do it. Or full out. Like, you are the best damn person for that job than anybody.
There is one key aspect of this, though, which is how this actually fits in as part of the solution conversation. Because if there's one little piece of data of like, hey, when you kind of ask me to do this thing in this way or speak to me in this way, this is how I feel, and going forwards, would you be willing to speak in this way?
Yeah.
I don't need to go into like the full detail of all my childhood and so on to be able to do that.
Or even all the meaning that I made up. You know, I feel like you don't respect me.
Yeah.
You never do that. You always like.
Yes.
And then there was this other time that you said it. And what about the time that you did it at that person's house and you did it in front of your mother? And then when I told you that time you did this, shit, man, that is a lot for somebody to take in.
Yeah. So this is kind of. That's more actually the solution conversation. I'm just giving you a little bit of the data of how I was impacted and what we might be able to do differently going forward. So that's not actually fully what we're talking about with the expressing conversation. The expressing conversation, I actually think of it as a form of like complaint.
Conscious complaint.
Like, and there's a place for complaining. There's a place for venting. There's a place for kind of just emptying out all of the kind of, you know, emotions and so on that are occurring. It's not always best, though, to do it with the person that you're complaining about, because of course that's hard. That's a hard thing to receive, all of that, you know. So,
but it's also just very labor intensive on a relationship. You know?
Yes, yeah.
Like, it's very labor intensive on a relationship, and I think that I will keep referring to couples because I guess I get to see that the most in how conflict plays out. But I just see the way that couples spend a lot of energy inside of expressing mode.
Yes.
And the danger of that is, like, there's a way that the point of the expressing mode is to have the other person interested in what you're about to sell them. So let me say that a little bit differently. Like, in sales, we think about, like, why. The why of something. So expressing mode is when I'm having the other person understand, like, why they might be interested in participating in something different with me. Now, in sales, you can seriously oversell to the point where people are like, oh, if buying this means buying it from you, I'm not interested because I'm exhausted. You know, I could have the same product from someone else and it'd be a whole lot less expensive to me energetically. So, like...
Do you mean, like, why would I want to listen to your expressing? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like, yeah. Well, why... No. So why would I want to be a part of this solution? Why would I want to be a part of the solution? So, for example... It might be something like leaning laughing emojis. I'm glad that was funny. I thought it was pretty funny. I haven't said it like that before, but it's like for example, let's say something that Carly's done I've found upsetting, and let's say I've stewed on it. Because that's the sort of shit that I can do in my blind spots. So let's say I've stewed on it and I haven't talked to him about it. Then it feels like it's juicy. You know, I've got a lot to say, right? And I've gathered data and I've really, you know, I'm going to go into this conversation knowing that I have a right to be here. Okay, so the expressing mode, the point though, is that I actually want him to be possibly doing something differently, which is why I'm feeling upset. Is like there's something that he's doing that when it lands in me, I feel hurt, or I feel, let's just say hurt, right? Not, yeah, that's a good word. Let's just say hurt. I feel hurt. Okay, so ultimately where we want to get to, like, is the why are we even doing this? Like, why am I expressing this to you? Is it just for the sake of you hearing that I'm in pain? Or is it actually because I would like a different outcome from the things that have been previously causing me pain? If it's the first one, get a therapist. That's not good. If it's just for the sake of having somebody be inside of your pain with you, you need help to find a way to actually be with you, because you're the best person.
You know, like somebody, like I think that,
or a good friend,
like
sure.
I think there are places where it can be okay to do that in a relationship, but it's risky territory, you know, and so I would be very cautious about doing that. And if you're going to do it, I would be very explicit in setting up the context. Like, hey, I've got something that I just really want to get off my chest. When you feel like, and I want to complain, you know, I just want to empty out.
But let it be rare.
Let it be rare.
Like,
totally.
I just think that people's measure, Carly, is not, in reality. I think that it's like going, oh no, 40 drinks is fine.
Yeah.
No, hang on a second. Like, for a sober person who doesn't drink that much, actually 40 drinks across a weekend is way too much, you know? Maybe that's too many. It's a while since I've had a drink. Let's say 25 drinks across a weekend, right? That's fine.
That's a lot still.
Yeah, well, you know, maybe like you go out Friday night and Saturday night and you have 12 drinks. No, I think that can be considered normal. Yeah. For sure. It's been normal for me at, you know, certain times in my earlier life.
The danger is when we feel like this entitlement that you should be there to, like, actually receive my complaint.
But if our normal is at 24 drinks a weekend, actually I do think I should be able to do that. And if you call me out for it, I'm like, you're a boring fart. Yeah. So actually I think I'm kind of really wanting to encourage people to change what their normal is, which is, like, have those conversations be rare, because truly you labor your relationships massively by doing that. Yeah. And you actually truly can get better at seeing yourself there and loving the absolute goodness out of yourself, that it makes sense that you feel those things. And then if you've got a friend that you can confide in that's really good at kind of staying neutral, share with them too. But, like, actually we are so capable of doing that, and that's why I suggested a therapist, because they can teach you how to do that for you.
And this is where it's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of us.
Oh, it's awful,
because our culture has this actual normalization of the entitlement that, like, you should, like, hear all of my kind of complaint, essentially, or my emptying out of my emotions, and if you don't, that you're a bad person somehow, right?
Right.
And actually,
or that you can't hold space for me.
Yeah. Yes,
you know, you can't be in your masculine and hold space for me. That is some really
as
toxic.
As a now, I'm like,
that's
relief.
Super toxic.
And the bitter pill, in a sense, is like, we're not always actually going to get that kind of validation from other people.
We're not, and I think
exactly.
Let's even say I would say, like, most of the time. Let's not even say we're not always, because that's BS, and it sets you up for feeling like, hang on a minute, I need to leave this relationship because I'm not blah. Like, actually, you're not going to get that a lot of the time. You're not that one in you that so deeply wants to be seen and known and relieved from the pain that you were not seen and known. She or he is not going to find solace in the people that are closest to you consistently, almost always. You're just not.
Yeah. We need to be able to give it to ourselves first and
100%.
foremost. I need to be able to speak to my, parts and say, yeah, I hear you. I hear that was hard and that was painful, and I get that, this was kind of our experience of it, like speaking to ourselves, and relating to ourselves in the way that we kind of we had wanted the other person to do. Like quite often
Yes.
we can do that. I wish they would just say that thing to us. Well,
Say it to yourself.
Say it to yourself, you know, and
Say it to
and
yourself.
feel that kind of that like sense of being seen. Like find that experience by being able to say the things you want to hear to yourself. And
Yes.
and the kind of the irony here is that we do often know what it is that we want to have said to us.
We totally know.
So,
We're waiting to hear it.
So like say it to yourself.
Say
You know? Yeah.
Give it to you. You deserve it. And this is the painful loop that we stay in, is like, actually it's the pain of not receiving what we need is so familiar that we don't want to do what Carly just said, and we do know what we want to hear from the other person. We just keep staying in and think that if we express more and more that they'll just finally say the thing. That's pretty unlikely. And in fact, the more that you express, the longer that you express for, it can be the less likely in certain dynamics that's going to happen. Unless you got like a more compliant type who really could just stay in and listen to it all the way through and then just meet you. Like the reality is you can actually get what it is that you want by giving it to yourself. But this is not the message. The message is not, you can give it all to yourself. That's not the message here, but it is an important step. The message is, most people have an unrealistic range of expressing. They express too much and they sell past the point of the sale. So if I say to Carly, hey babe, I really want to have a conversation with you about this thing. It's really important to me. And I actually end up feeling really hurt when it doesn't happen. I feel lonely and I feel self-conscious and I feel not connected to you, and that has me feel really sad, and overall I just feel hurt at the moment. Could we have this conversation? When's a good time? Do you know what? I've done a good portion of my expression mode. I've given him the why as to why he would want to be in that conversation with me. So back to what I was saying before, this is about sales. It's about having a person want to buy into why they would want to do conflict with you and get to the other side. So it's saying just enough for that person to get what's happening for you. Don't give them the whole brochure with all the fine print of all the meaning you ever made up about it and all the different feelings you went through during the process. You will, if Carly says to me, sure babe, let's have that conversation at blah blah time, or do you know what, I'm actually feel available right now. The sale's done. The sale's done. He's in. He said yes. He's available. He's ready. He knows that this thing that he's been doing hurts me. I feel alone. I feel scared. Feel insecure. He didn't say, no, bugger off, I'm not interested. He said, yeah, let's do it. The part of me that then wants to unload on him because now I've got an audience, that shit is dangerous. Because actually, that's the one that goes like, okay, Carly, I'm going to give you all my little parts that feel really all of those feelings, and now you need to make them feel better. No. Actually, in really healthful relationships that thrive, past that point, I just want to start talking with him about what do we need to do moving forward so that this doesn't happen for me. And are there things that he'd be willing to do to change in himself or the way he behaves or the way he thinks about things so that that doesn't happen anymore? Yeah. That's a pretty controversial thing to say. I just want to put a bookmark in that if you feel triggered about like the small amount of sharing that happened there on my part, I would look to the parts of you that really need more than that and do some deep inquiry with them. Like, what is it that they truly are needing? And can you give that to them? Because I think what you're going to find is that you can. Yeah. I want to kind of just unpack a few of the things you've said here. Please do. So, I got evangelistic there and went for it.
Preach to the choir. Convert the choir. So, like, another way of saying what you just said is like I want to ultimately want to create an outcome. Like why am I sharing these things? You know, what do I want to be different going forwards?
Yes.
You know, and this is where I like a distinction between feedback versus feed forward. You know, because feedback you could say is like, you did that thing and I didn't like it and I felt hurt by it. I just like keep telling you like what happened in the past, and I keep kind of explaining over and over and over, and it's kind of, you know,
exhausting.
Like, we can only kind of take so much feedback in a sense, and I don't kind of know what to do with it. Whereas feed forward as a concept is what, based on what happened, how do I take that and do something differently going forwards? And that's kind of what you were doing there. I was giving you the feedback, but only a little bit, so I could ask for something different.
Because the
in
truth
future.
is, do you really need more than that?
Yes,
Do you really,
yeah.
truly, like, do you really need more? Like, is that not enough to know that I feel insecure, hurt, lonely and sad? I mean, that's some intense shit to feel. And do you really need more than that? Like, if that doesn't touch you in some way where you go like,
Yeah.
that sucks. Like, if that doesn't touch you in some way that you actually want to know, well, then that's a whole other thing. But,
Yes. Yeah.
he's less likely to want to push back in any way if really I'm just sharing the crux of the feeling for me. There's no reason why he wouldn't want to participate if he loves me.
But so this is the other kind of key point that I wanted to touch on, right? Which is that a lot of the time, for a lot of us, I don't think we're always very clear actually on what outcome we're wanting.
Right.
So we just have a lot of feelings, and
Yeah.
kind of a little bit unconsciously, the outcome we're wanting is just to kind of be validated, you know, and have
It's to
all our
dump.
it's to empty out all of our feelings. So if that's kind of
Why? Because we're wanting to be reprieved. And
Yes.
that's just
Yeah.
kind of a bit
Yeah.
of a setup, because the chances is that me unloading on you for 30 minutes, you're probably not going to want to reprieve me at that point. So this is the
Totally.
tricky territory, right?
Totally.
You end up not getting what you want.
Yes, so like knowing, like asking yourself, what's my intent actually here? What's the outcome that I'm actually wanting, and how do I actually ask for it? And then how do I share my kind of experience, my feelings as context, you know, rather than, and like if the outcome that I am wanting is actually to unload, well, maybe think about getting that need met in a different way. Like through a therapist or a third-party friend who's not going to feel the intensity of all that feedback because it's kind of not directed actually at them.
Yeah.
You know, so and like knowing what we want, I think is like being in the habit of just asking ourselves that, what do we want to create here, you know, and then how do I best influence that with another person, which is the kind of the sales piece, you know, and that's kind of like so key, you know, and the last thing that I wanted to add to kind of the stuff you're saying is that in the kind of conscious relating world where there's an emphasis on people
Expressing.
like sharing their feelings, you know, and I think kind of being in touch with our feelings and sharing them is great, but it can very easily actually gets into this, and that's when you hear people talk about like processing, you know, like we just end in this like up in these endless processing conversations, and they're like so fucking tiring, you know, like
I used to
like-
love them though.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about love them,
Yeah.
but let me just say, if there was anyone who was going to be inside of a processing conversation where they were triggered, it was me. Particularly in relationship. Not so much with friends. Like, it's been very, very few and far between that's happened for me in friendship. It could have happened with my family relationships too, actually, where I would like not be willing to move on because they wouldn't and couldn't process with me, and it was like this perfect setup for me to like feel so like the black sheep, you know, because I couldn't get this need met. But it would absolutely happen consistently for me in partnerships. That processing, I felt, was the thing that I needed so deeply. So I'm laughing a lot, and my levity is actually because I feel levity today. I feel free. I feel free from being had by this hungry ghost that really couldn't get fed. And if you hear me say that and that just really hurts, I get that too, because I used to really feel that way, like, fuck you. Like, it's not that I'm like a highly processing person. It's not that I'm intense. It's not that I'm like can't take care of myself. Like, I just want this person, I need to feel like my partner understands me. I need to feel that. And, you know, I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, so we're the romantics, you know, where that would like totally fit. My 4s out there will also understand. Like, there's a way that trust me on this one, I feel more seen, more understood, more known, more loved than I ever did before. And I share a lot less, and it is not painful. I feel free. I feel like I get the thing that I want. I get understood, and I get outcomes that I'm wanting. And I don't feel exhausted by conflict loops consistently where I'm having to then recover from them, which I've been there. Like, the shift over was really uncomfortable for me. The shift of containment was really, really painful for me. I was sobering up. It was a withdrawal process. Literally, it was a withdrawal from a drug. And the drug was the feeling, the deep feeling of longing that I'll never be known and met and understood. I was addicted to that feeling, and I created context which gave me the outcome that I didn't want. So this is our first kind of step in terms of sharing the things that we want to share with you. But if you don't have this part down, like one of you's in expressing mode, the other one's in solution mode, it's going to be tricky. And if you have an unrealistic, or who am I to say what's realistic, but if your range for how long you can be in expressing mode is not a fit for the other person, or means that you don't end up getting to the solution, that's something really worth looking at. If you don't get to the solution in conflict, it's not necessarily because of the other person. And looking at how long you stay inside of expressing mode could be a really great thing to look at.
Yes.
Because expressing mode is pretty triggering for another person. If you stay in it for a long time, and long is subjective, but if you stay in it past the sale, people will start to have an experience of like, what's the point?
I want to briefly, and it might be worth us actually doing a whole separate talk on this, but talk about being in the other position where I'm receiving this person expressing, right? So like for me personally, if it's someone I care about, like I do want to be able to hold space for people and like hold space for their feelings if they're kind of in process of venting and so on. But I'm only going to have so much tolerance. So that expressing mode generally will come with a bunch of judgment too. So I'm having to kind of hold good boundaries around the projections that someone's making of me, the judgments. You know, and me holding good boundaries is me going, well, I'm trying to filter out like what does fit for me there and what doesn't. But if I'm like kind of starting to reach my threshold, you know, I'm probably going to start actually asserting boundaries with the other person. I'm going to say like, hey, I'm finding this conversation pretty intense and I've probably only got a few more minutes left in me to be able to do this, you know, and or I might actually look to try and shift it and like, hey, I'd love to talk about what we might do differently going forward. So I purposely actually kind of invite shifting the conversation to be more in that solution mode type conversation. You know, and there's this territory itself can have a lot of nuance, because if a person is kind of addicted to expressing and they get into that kind of entitled righteous spot of like, no, until you've fully validated me, I'm just going to keep going, it can be really hard to actually assert those boundaries because they'll be perceived as like, you don't care about me, you know? And it can be really hard to shift it to the solution mode conversation because I know I'm not ready to talk about the solution yet because I don't feel like I've properly been validated yet. So, you know, and that itself then has got like, how the heck do I start to kind of have the person kind of realize the extent of the impact they're having and the extent of the impact kind of on our relationship generally. So all of that territory, I think, kind of probably is worth bookmarking, you know. And,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's bookmark that for like, what does clean expression mode look and sound like? And if it's not a clean expression mode, then what does the other person kind of need in that process to be able to have? So somebody asked, how do we set these conversations up? Well, someone just wrote, I love the distinction of talking past the sale. Selling past the sale. So once the sale's being made, like once the person said yes, you made it, like they're in. They're already in. Now we collaboratively work out what the product is that we're moving towards. But that takes an internal embodiment shift. So I might be bristly, but once that person is agreed to being inside of a conversation to move forward with me, that's on me then. And this is where I see people sell past the sale. They stay bristly. Instead of, like somebody asked, where's listening mode? Well, I, as the expressor, I want to be listening to their nonverbal cues, their verbal cues. If they say, yeah, right, let's have that conversation, or I want to talk about that, you've already won. They're in. They don't really need much more than that. They're in. Let's talk about how we're going to do this now moving forwards, right? So then I want to be able to shift my embodiment into, they're here with me. They've agreed to be a part of this change with me now. I can soften and relax, and we can collaboratively work out what that will be. So how to set that up with somebody? You don't really need to set it up, because a key indication of whether you've made the sale or not is whether they're willing to have the conversation with you about the thing. So you tell the person that you want to have a conversation about the thing, and in that you do some expressing. Tell them why it's important to you. Have them feel it. This is important to me. Let them feel the backbone that you have of, hey, I need your attention. This is important to me, and give them some of how you feel. But when that's already happened, then when they say, yes, let's do it, you made the sale. It's happened. It's done. You got what you wanted. Now, you talk about moving forwards. What do we do about this? It's actually really simple. And sometimes people don't like how simple it is. Because it's not what we see. It's not the songs that we hear, the movies that we watch. It's not really, you don't see it. But we practice it, and it works super well. Like for me, my life has changed. My nervous system's changed. So you don't need to actually set it up, but you could say to somebody, hey, I've got some stuff that I'd like to express. Would you be willing to listen to me for 10 minutes? I'm not actually ready to move into a solution, but I do feel these things and I would like to get heard here. So it's also a possibility, right?
Time containers.
Definitely good. But I just want you to know that even 10 minutes is actually quite a long time. Sorry. I know you don't want to probably hear that, but it is. It is. You can actually summarize the crux of what happened for you pretty fast. Like, it's just enough for the other person to get you. And
like the key point that we're just like hammering a lot here really is that other people aren't responsible for how you feel.
Yes.
Like, yes,
damn it.
Yes, how they impacted us, you know, we need to take responsibility for asking for what we need there, but it's our responsibility ultimately to validate ourselves, to be with our own feelings, to validate our own realities, you know, to soothe ourselves, you know, and that's kind of the bitter pill here. You know, if we expect other people to do that stuff for us, then we are just going to kind of, in all likelihood, get stuck in these expressing conversations.
Yeah, so like, can you listen to me for 10 minutes is processing territory. Truly, I dare you. I just, like, this is an experiment. Like, when you feel charged by something, see if you could, rather than it be this thing that we've like created, which we're going to have this big conversation, it's going to be painful, etc., etc. It's like, what if I could imagine that I could actually tell this person this thing in a matter of sentences in the setup of arranging this conversation to happen at a particular point in time? Can you imagine how easily and quickly you would move through the stuff that triggers you? And how much safer it would feel for you to get triggered by things, because it doesn't end up, what's waiting is not this big, hardcore, processing, painful experience where you don't get met, heard, and seen. Like, can you imagine if it was just like, hey, honey, you've said a couple of times that you would tidy up the kitchen when you finished, or when the kids go to school, you said a couple of times that you would do that, and it hasn't happened. And in the mornings, it's left me feeling overwhelmed when I wake up, and I start to feel lonely, that I'm carrying a lot. Could we have a conversation about that at some point? Guess what? I don't need to go into expressing mode anymore. He got it. He doesn't need to hear more than that. And then when we have the conversation, I can start to talk about, these are the things that I would really love to see happening. Can you just try on for a moment? Just imagine if you related to your own issues with that degree of easefulness, naturalness, and levity. Naturalness. Imagine if it was just natural for me to have those feelings come up, mention them to Carly, let him know this is what's happening. I don't need to have heaps of time to do it. Ask him, can he have a conversation with me about it when he's available? Imagine how unscary having triggering starts to be, how unscary it starts to be for us. Because I just know that I can say these couple of things, and then when we do talk, we're actually going to start being productive with each other about how to fix it. And then we do fix it.
Yeah, then the solution conversation is, oh, well, when I get up in the morning, I feel quite rushed, and I end up leaving stuff left out, and okay, well, I need to probably get up earlier. Then probably means...
I love that we're having this conversation.
That means going to bed earlier. But hang on, I want to make sure that we have time to hang out with the girls, and actually we're not doing dinner early enough, and would you be willing to actually help do dinner, because that will then... Like that, now we're in a solution conversation that kind of is us about exploring how we collaborate in reality.
And then I feel loved by you, because I can see that you want to collaborate with me, and that I'm not alone, and it's not that you don't respect me and that you don't care about me, and you aren't left feeling like, wow, that was a lot. She doesn't even get my world. What do we even do about this? Better not leave the dishes.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's a very different experience when we can have those types of conversations with each other. And lastly, the course that we're going to be teaching, or the workshop for the day, Relational Alchemy. It's alchemy because I go from feeling alone, hurt, upset, scared, unsupported, I could go on, resentful.
That's an important one.
Notice how I put that one in last, because it's probably the biggest feeling I have of all of them.
Yeah.
Is alchemized very quickly into collaboration, understanding, forward planning, action. What the shit? That's alchemy. And do you know what? It's actually available way more than we realize. And it's how we do it will determine quite often whether we get the thing. Unless we've got a total martial artist, relational partner or friend who's able to dodge all of our spikes and our bullets, so long as they're not a compliant type, and if they are, then it's not real anyway. Not real connection, I mean. Really, people... Yeah, we can get along with each other a lot more easily.
There's one last bookmark,
okay,
because we're going to do more of these, and
yes,
and where this stuff I think can really start to get messy and very confusing is, let's say Prem said that stuff to me, hey, I feel hurt when there's this stuff on the bench, and rather than me going, yeah, I'm willing to have a conversation about it, I get hurt and defensive, and I'm
right.
you don't care about me, and actually I'm tired. I'm we're being here, this is real stuff, right?
Yeah.
And now in a sense I got different dynamics going on. I've got, how we have the conversation is actually taking us out. So I could talk about that, or I could talk about like the dish thing, you know? And this is something that's taken us out heaps. We've like, we get lost in how we have the conversation and don't actually talk about the thing, you know? And so that's the bookmark. So how do we, like, when there's all this kind of stuff that gets really convoluted, figure out how to kind of unpick things gradually a little bit, because that's where I think it can be really confusing and feel just really like kind of messed up. It's like spaghetti, you know?
Well, I
like,
can't wait to get into that one, because I've got some pretty good ideas. Yes. Sweet.
Cool. And yeah, that was a long one. So
that was a long one. That was more like a workshop. But we are actually teaching a workshop. So, you know, if you like what we're talking about, come and be with us for a day. We have navigated the shit out of this stuff. Like, truly, we have. Those people that know us, they know that. We have gone the distance. We've got the degree. We've got the PhD. We've made the mistakes. We've got a doctorate now, right? So we're armed up and ready to, like, really help people in this particular area. Cool. If you want to know when it is, just scroll down on my Facebook page. You'll find something. It's called Relational Alchemy, 2nd of December. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.